Dulles family, welcome. Please pardon my allergy face and allergy eyes today. This has been a tough couple days for me with the weather. Hey, a couple quick things before the message starts. One is we are recording the audio of my messages live on stage at Lightridge, and they are posted within about 24 hours on podcast platforms. And a number of you tell us that you still watch from time to time like this, but you most often listen now to our podcast, and we encourage that. We think it's just overall a better experience. Also, a lot of people in our church serve together and make possible the Washington West Film Festival every October, and USA Today nominated the festival again for the second time as one of the 20 best film festivals in North America. That's out of hundreds, I think like 400 film festivals or more. And voting is happening. If you want to vote, you can Google USA Today 10 Best in the name of the film festival. You'll see the link. You can vote for us every day. We're trying to make the top 5, which would be really great. Okay, so we're in this series that we've been calling Voice, about hearing the voice of God regularly, daily, as a active part of our lives, a consistent part of our lives, so much so that the experience of hearing God's voice changes our own voice, where we become more hopeful and we become encouragers and discerners for others. And I'm going to just jump in today by talking about the new video game that's kind of taking the world by storm. Harry Potter Legacy has been a long-awaited game, and if it's overstated to say this game has taken the world by storm, it's definitely been the hot video game for the last few weeks since it released. It was anticipated for a long time. It's an open world game, meaning no boundaries. There's kind of limitless play. Alex Forster is one of quite a few in our church who I know already has the game and has been playing it. He told me that he spent the first week playing the game never leaving Hogwarts. Like, there's just so many endless places to go to. So all of this led me to a message on Slack last week. I told Andrew, hey, I really want to start gaming again. Like, would you kind of help me get back into the video game world again? I've been on a break for about 3 decades, and Andrew laughs and kind of makes fun of me for that. And that's not exactly true. I went through a phase with Halo, a couple versions of Halo, and some other games. But all of this takes me back to that night in the winter, on winter break, when I was 19 or 20, and my brother was home, and some of our friends were over, and we were addict video game players, avid, I should say. We were addicts. On Friday nights, especially on winter break, when we were all together, we were hosting at our house. And we often would play till 2 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. And sometime late that night, I'm going to say maybe around 11 o'clock, guys were coming in, and something was going on inside of me, which I'll explain. And I said, guys, why don't you, I'll sit out first. You guys start. We had food in the kitchen, and I just kind of quietly went in the kitchen and in the side closet put on my winter gear and went out to walk late at night. And it had snowed. I walked through the snow that night. And what I would say today is I went to walk and spend time with God, but as a 19 or 20-year-old, I was just trying to figure some things out. And I remember I wasn't overly stressed. I was concerned about my future and what I was going to do with my life, but it wasn't something that I felt necessarily stressed about. I was just, really thinking about what career path am I going to choose. I wasn't dealing with necessarily a lot of anxiety. What was happening inside of me was I was at this point where I could see the future, and I felt like I was about to do what the whole world does. You get a job, you finish college, you get a job, you try to make a lot of money, you start a family, you raise kids, hopefully you send them off into the world, and then you someday retire, and you hope to have, a healthy retirement and some fun, and then you grow old and die. And this is my way 30 years later of explaining this. I was just wrestling with this. Like, am I going to cycle the way everybody else does? I'm going to rotate around the sun, 80 times, 85 times, maybe 90 times, hopefully, and grow old and die. And that's kind of it. And that's kind of where my frame of mind was. And I did write down often these kinds of moments. I have this old notebook where I wrote down this experience. And so that's what I was sort of struggling with, it was really about my purpose. Like, is there more than just doing what everybody does? You get a job, you try to make enough money, and you do the best you can in a family, and then hopefully you don't die before you're, 80 or 90. That was what's going through my head. And so I went out to walk. And I was walking essentially to connect to this innate awareness I had about my Creator. My Creator has made me. I just believed, I really did believe that the world is governed ultimately by the force of love, that God, our Creator, is love, and that we, having this ability to love other people, that's got to come from somewhere else other than just rocks that exploded and molecules that exploded, and we ended up with this ability to feel empathy and love for one another. And so I'm just kind of taking you into the philosophy of what I was dealing with as a 20-year-old. And I didn't hear anything audible. I didn't hear God speak out loud to me, but I knew, like I was walking in the snow that night, it was that real to me, that my source of life, my source of purpose, knowing that I matter, that life doesn't just end someday, there's a bigger reason, that source of good and beauty was the one who created me. The source was actually my Creator. And I went through this and I drive Amy crazy with this kind of, logic or thinking, but on that walk that night, I don't remember everything about that walk. I don't remember everything that I contemplated or directly said to God. But one thing I remember was thinking about our eyeballs. Like, I was thinking, man, our eyeballs, my eyes have this ability to recognize shapes and colors, and optic nerves run to the brain, and my brain can interpret distance, how far away something is. Like, that cannot be accident. This has to be part of the design of me. Intentional design, not just accidental Brad, but this intentional purpose of Brad. And my ability to laugh, walking that night in the cold, how did I develop the ability to laugh or to relate to people who are hurting or struggling or something that we have in common, and to have friendship? And so I'm contemplating all this. I'm not sure I went to actually walk and talk to God as much as I went to contemplate, what is my purpose, and where does my purpose derive from? If God has designed me to laugh and relate to people through friendship, what kind of God can do that? And that's where I was on this walk. And I knew that I can't work. Brad can't work or function properly, divided from my Creator. And so what became clear to me on this walk was that God didn't just make me and plant me down on this earth and then tell me, go exist for 80 years or 90 years and do the best you can and get a job like everybody else and make money like everybody else. But detached from Him. Go live your life. I made you, and now I'm kind of hands off. I knew in my heart, I don't know what language I would have used, my soul, my spirit, I had this deep awareness that for life to work and to make sense and to have the purpose that we're intended to have, we've got to be connected to the one who created us with purpose, who intentionally, purposefully designed us. I knew in my being that this was God who was calling me to be aware of Him. By the way, this has nothing to do with me being a pastor. This is God's calling to us. I believe He calls all of us this way, every human. And that night was one of many, many, many examples. And one of the early examples I remember of knowing, being aware that God was calling me to be aware of Him personally. It wasn't about trying to hear God audibly or see signs written in the sky. It was about perceiving the voice of God in a way different than we humans. I always think that we have this limitation. I grew up in church believing we have the luxury of humans of speaking out loud to each other and seeing one another and writing things down on paper and communicating visibly to one another. And the limitation we have with God is he's invisible and he's hard to perceive and hard to understand. And that night and many other experiences with God, I realized, wow, there's this other dimension. There's this other part of us that can perceive voice and communication and intentionality. And that is the awareness that I was made by an intentional God with purpose. And so God was calling me that night to just be aware. Don't try to hear lots of things with my ears. Don't rush back to my friends and say, God told me something, which sounds kind of freaky and dramatic. Be aware. God was calling me, Brad, be aware of me personally, of him personally, and that he was worth following completely with every part of me, my whole life. Now, what I'm describing is the voice of God. It's the voice of God can be that inner desire, that inner wanting to be connected to him, that inner awareness of truth. The voice of God can come from Scripture. If God has the ability to come physically in flesh and blood to this earth and take on our sin and mistakes and regrets and guilt, all of our incompleteness, and then on the cross, and then walk out of the tomb, if Jesus can come to this earth and make clear who God actually is, well, of course he could manuscript in writing his story and description about himself. Of course he could, and why wouldn't he? So we can hear God in our inner desire to be connected to him, that inner soul, our spirit being aware there's something attaching me to my design, the one who made me. That's the call of God. We can hear the voice of God through Scripture, and we can hear the voice of God through community, through people who are also pursuing him, who are also experiencing him, where they encourage and they speak words of wisdom and guidance to us. And so I was tempted to put on the screen again today Genesis 1 and 2. We've looked a lot at this in this series. And I'm going to just review quickly that God created men and women in his image. And then he blessed us. It's the first thing God spoke to humans was be blessed. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Offering a gift. Blessing is offering a gift or present while kneeling. God blessed us with life. Go and multiply. Be fruitful. And govern the world of creation with my image. It's this burgeoning life idea. As you go into the world with my image, vitality will just seep out of you and radiate out of you. There's no decay in this world. There's no aging. There's no death. There's no hurt. It's just life. And everywhere we display God's image, more life replicates. This is God's blessing to us. Men and women, go and do this. And then, of course, we broke all of that by taking control, trying to take control. The connective tissue that was supposed to be between life in just life in the wilderness and in creation and God, the connective tissue between life replicating and continuing to thrive in beauty and good and perfection, the connection between that and God was us, the supreme object of God's creation, men and women bearing his image throughout creation. And we broke all of that. And we ruined it, and we broke this world by taking control, by removing God at the center and putting ourselves in the center of purpose and life. We see this language continue about recognizing God's reality in life and creation in places like Psalms 19. Psalm 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, meaning the sky, the created sky above us. And the firmament shows his handiwork. When you see the stars, when you see the weather, when you see the sky, that alone describes for us, announces to us God's creative handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. This message of creation it's an announcement. It's a declaration. It's a constant, perpetual declaring that God is the source of life. And we are supposed to thrive in that source of life, in the shadow of his creation. All of this was done so that we could know him, so that we could personally know him. Now let's go to the New Testament. Paul says something similar here. Paul's writing in Romans 8, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height," and this is creative language, the height like the highest mountain, "or depth, the lowest part of the sea, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." Nothing can separate us from the Creator who designed us to know him and to be reconnected, reestablished back in relationship with him. Now, if you're tempted to think, and often we do, and maybe you were taught this in church, I was taught this in church, that God is only close to those who have surrendered their lives to Jesus. Well, we have a place here that we're going to read where actually God's presence is always beckoning and calling anyone and everyone, all of his children, those who are close to him and pursuing Jesus, and those who are far from God or even agnostic or atheist in their thinking. God is still close to them, calling them, trying to draw their attention to him as their creator, as their ultimate purpose and source for life. Here's an example, and I'm just ripping this straight from John Ortberg. I heard John Ortberg's podcast a while back. He was going through his series about healthy habits. John Ortberg is a pastor, teacher on the West Coast in California who I've followed for years. And he reminded me of Acts 17. He read Acts 17 on this particular day. And it just got my wheels turning and how it relates to this. All right, Acts 17 is where Paul is about to speak in Athens on the Areopagus. Areopagus is the rock outcrop that's a prominent place still today in Athens, ancient Athens, where the Acropolis stood in the distance and many gods and idols were set up, and the ancient Greek council or Supreme Court would meet outside on this rock outcropping that Areopagus is translated into English Mars Hill. And this is often referred to as Mars Hill or the sermon at Mars Hill. And Paul is teaching here to a polytheistic culture. Polytheism is the belief in many gods. Christianity and Judaism are one of the few monotheistic religions, major world religions that believe there's one God. Many world religions are polytheistic, and so was ancient Greece, where they believed there were just many, many gods, and you had to try to appease the sun god and the rain god, and there were certain types of worship to do to make sure you got good crops. And Paul is noticing, he's trying to relate to them and connect to them before revealing the truth about Jesus. And he notices that there's one particular God called the unknown God. And we read this in Acts 17. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus. It's amazing, you can visit it today. My brother and dad just went about 5 or 6 years ago. They had some meetings in Greece and did some vacationing, and they went right up onto Mars Hill on the Areopagus there where Paul stood. "People of Athens," Paul said, "I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription." And the inscription was, "To an unknown God." And what Paul's doing here so cleverly is he's recognizing that even in polytheistic cultures and theologies where there's just all kinds of gods, there's the fertility god, and it almost seems to our culture like sort of silly, or we sort of mock ancient Greek mythology, but they would even acknowledge there's a God that we don't know. There's a God that we haven't understood. And so Paul says, I'm going to reveal to you who that God is. It's really the God, Creator God. "For as I walked through and saw all the objects of worship, I even saw this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. You're worshiping a God you don't even know. You say we don't even know who this God is, so let me tell you," he says. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, meaning it's not these separate gods of the land and soil and of the heavens and the clouds. There's one God who created it all and who created you. He does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands, meaning that he can only thrive by our power. Like it's up to us to help sustain him, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. Everyone and everything that's living has its life source in this creator, Paul says. And it brings to mind places like Colossians or even John 1, which we've looked at, and we'll review again here in just a moment, where all things were made by Jesus. All things were made by him and for him, we're told. We continue in verse 26. From one man he made all nations, meaning Abraham, that they should inherit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. And I just misspoke. We talked about Abraham a couple weeks ago. He's actually referring to creating men and women in the garden, Adam and Eve. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out to him. God created boundaries and lands and countries as a way of leading us to reach out to him. This language, reach out to, it's this rare Greek word that translates into English like to fumble around for. Not unintentionally, but you're intentionally looking for something, but like fumbling in a junk drawer for your keys, or maybe in your pockets until you find them. Like you're looking through what maybe seems messy or unclear or uncertain until you find it. God designed us to be able to reach out to him and for us to find him, discover and know him and be known. This is what God made you for, to discover him, to know him, and to be known by him. Though he is not far from any one of us. Paul's not talking to believers here that make up a church. He's talking to people who are devoted to other religions and pagan religions. He's saying that we would know that he's not far from any one of us. God is pressing in to know everyone, regardless of what you've done or where you've been or what you've believed or not believed about him. For in him we live and move and have our being, Paul says. And he goes on to say he has given proof of this to everyone by raising Jesus from the dead. So I want to finish our time today talking about bids for connection. The Gottmans, a married couple, John and Julie Gottman, they created decades ago, the Gottman Institute, which studies relationships. Their purpose is to create stronger relationships, human relationships, and to strengthen relationships through study and research. And they have a lot of fascinating data. And one data point is this about relationships that thrive and succeed and relationships that fall apart. And the data point I'm going to refer to relates to marriage. And before I get to that data point, they make this observation about bids of connection, that all humans offer other people bids of connection. They present a bid for connection, like someone at work could say, "Hey, would you want to hit the golf course sometime?" That is a bid for connection, and based on how you respond, you could respond one of three ways, the Gottmans say. You can respond turning toward, where you lean in and say, "Oh, that would be great," or "I would really like that," or "Which golf course are you talking about?" Or you can turn away from, which is a leaning away or seeming passive, like, maybe, where you seem sort of negative or you're not really interested. It's almost an ignoring someone's reaching out to you is a turning away. And then there's turning against, where you sort of respond like, "Can you see I'm working right now?" Or "You can't tell that I'm busy," or you repel them in some way. And the Gottmans use marriage as an example to all relationships and how we with the person that we should be closest to and the person we're most comfortable with, we often repel. We turn against or turn away rather than turn toward. And the interesting data point is that of marriages that fail, their studies and many, many surveys, and this is after decades of work, marriages that fail, it's couples who turn toward bids of connection only happens 33% of the time. So when marriages succeed and thrive, a common practice in those marriages is that they turn toward connection 86% of the time. They turn toward bids of connection 86% of the time. And we are taught often, and I've been taught, that couples need to focus most of their attention on conflict resolving, conflict resolution, listening to one another in conflict, and getting better at conflict. And I believe that's true, but the Gottmans make the case that no, the most important focus you should make as a couple is recognizing bids for connection. After an argument, or when you've just felt disconnected, or there's been tension, financial tension, or just trouble parenting, when someone makes a bid for connection, like, hey, would you like to try a different place out for dinner? Or, hey, tell me how that project at work is going. That when couples reciprocate, they actually turn toward that bid for connection. The couples that succeed and thrive and really enjoy life together, it's 86%. Couples 86% of the time, those who succeed and thrive are turning toward, they're listening for, they're looking for an offer for connection. And it just really got me thinking about God doing this. We do this in friendship or at work or with neighbors and with our own family members. We offer bids of connection because God designed us this way. We were made in the image of God. He created us to be known. And this takes us back to John chapter 1. John 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word. He was the Word. Jesus was the Word. The spoken word was with the Father in the beginning, and they spoke creation into being and then blessed humans and said, our life will be in you. Go and multiply and subdue the world with my life. Through him, all things were made. Without Jesus, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Jesus came to speak to us, so much intent to know us. He did this because he wants to be known by us, and we were made to know him and know the love of God. And so will you put into practice this week? Not trying to hear the audible voice of God or be able to tell somebody, wow, I just heard something dramatic. But would you lean into the inner prompting that is in every human being, that I recognized as a 19 or 20-year-old, that God has created the world in a way to help us understand, wait a minute, we perceive, we have the ability to know and have knowledge. We can perceive moods and attitudes and hurting people. We can be empathetic. We can dream about the future. The ability to think or anticipate that the future could be better or the future could be improved. This all comes from the intentional designer who made you. And you have these abilities to live out and thrive in this kind of life when connected to the source of life. And so would you put into practice this week, getting in your car and going somewhere, or finding a quiet room in your house, or early before work, getting up a little early and with a cup of coffee, just thinking toward God or saying to God, God, I cannot thrive apart from you, the one who made me. I cannot live a purposeful life outside of just doing the regular routine of having a job and making money and sending kids off into the future and growing old and dying. God, there's got to be more to life. And I believe that life is in the awareness. It begins with the awareness that you are the source of life, that you, Jesus, are the source of life. And I invite you to just say that prayer with me. Jesus, I choose to recognize you as the source of life. As messy as my life is right now, with all the challenges or the mistakes that I've made, you have come to right the world. You have come to order my life. You have come to restore a broken world. And I allow you to begin that with me, the God of purpose and order, giving me, defining my purpose and defining my order. I love you, Dulles family. Wherever you are, whatever you're going through, whatever life has been like, you have a God who intentionally created you with purpose, and you begin to walk in the regular voice of God and the activity of God, the remarkable of God, when you give yourself over to the awareness that you only have life from the source of life, who is Jesus. I'll see you next week.